Well, DEI stand for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they're big words that can mean a lot of different things to different people. To be anti-racist is to actively challenge, disrupt, and remove racist systems, policy, and thought.
One of the ways that we act, our purpose, is to connect people with places. But what we're doing is connecting people with places. So who are the people? Where are the places? Are there places that do not exist because of historical injustice? Are there people who have been denied access to transportation because of historical injustice? What can we do internally to make sure that we are even able to answer those questions? I'm a middle-aged white lady named Karen. I should be the last person talking about anti-racism. So how can I make sure that I'm listening to the people who are the right people to talk about it?
At Modo, inclusion is embedded in our purpose. It's really fundamental to why we exist and has been from the very first day. Our purpose is to transform communities by connecting people with places in a way that's affordable, convenient, inclusive, and sustainable. To truly transform communities through our work, we need to engage all the community. As we reflected on realization of our purpose, we asked ourselves, how inclusive are we? We take, as a cooperative, we've taken many actions to be more inclusive. We've added wheelchair accessible vans to our fleet. We've supported the LGBTQ+ community. We've made cars available to those that support seniors. We take a lot of actions, but to know if we're realizing purpose, the answer is rather subjective and unsatisfying. And it was pretty clear that we needed to go further.
I think the answer to that is yes. I think there was a sense that we are always striving to be inclusive. Is there a barrier to entry for anyone who is of a different color or sexual orientation or sex or anything like that? We would obviously say no. So I think there was that sort of assumption, but what we weren't doing is sort of looking at the layer beneath that as sort of like diving in deeper into the systemic parts that might have been built into Modo over its history. Yes, I do believe that we were sort of basing on the assumption that there was no barrier to entry because we hadn't done the work of looking deeper into the system and to what we're asking for and why we're asking it and how those requirements might be keeping people out. So I think that's one of the important questions that we're asking at this point.
In the summer months of 2020, we knew for certain we wanted to take action as a membership, and we also knew we had to ask for outside help. We were ready to hear direct and specific feedback from members of BIPOC communities, and we needed to ensure that the way this work was approached would be done with expertise and care. From the design of surveys and how questions are asked to how the results were compiled and delivered, we went with a team that combined the research experience of Majid Khoury and the inclusive communications and lens of AndHumanity. And when we spoke to Majid and Tammy, we just felt a good connection and understanding with one another.
Well, I was excited about this RFP because it really tackled a first for me in terms of the problem that the research was trying to address. I've done a lot of work with BIPOC around, testing nuances of communication, assessing impact of communications among that group, but there isn't much research that was done at this upfront level where Modo was trying to really understand, am I representative as an organization of these different BIPOC population and other underrepresented population probably, and if so, what to do about it. So it really got me excited that this project would include some thinking that is ahead of what some of the other organizations have done.
Well, I think with Majid's decades and decades of experience with market research and then AndHumanity's in-depth lens when it comes to inclusive communications, we felt that we could bring the perfect mix of team to this project. I think part of the challenges with inclusive communications is that most of it is kind of developed in a dominant lens. And what we're trying to do is actually reverse some of that work or relearn some of that work. A very simple example is most surveys are created with, say, male, female, and then the others. or even trans in others, but that's literally in order of privilege. So what we try to do is make sure that it's in alphabetical order and that we include as many dimensions of difference within the non-binary community.
I was most excited about being able to do research with a cooperative on something that is so important these days, and not much is being done in terms of many organizations. The other thing is it was different in the sense that Modo looked at BIPOC as they are defined, people of color, indigenous, and the Black community, and most of the other research has been only focused on two communities in the province.
A project where the leadership team was really bought in, really believed it. A lot of times there's some conversations around it and some belief in it, but Modo was willing to actually put in the time, money and effort into making sure that they were doing it right. And that takes great leadership. The biggest challenge, because this is a very new way of surveying, it's also asking questions that are quite sensitive that maybe the community had never been asked before on a corporate level in a corporate survey or a co-op survey. That it was really important to be sensitive with the way that we were asking the information, and also in the way that wasn't leaning towards one way or the other. It was important to create a safe space.
We never expected the process to be easy, but we wanted to make sure that we can talk to these individuals and really get to the bottom of the barriers. Now, again, the people we were talking to were not Modo BIPOC members. These were non-members. So we had to really, find someone out there to agree to speak to us about this topic and be familiar with car sharing. The other thing is we needed to make sure we have enough representation of the different groups in terms of backgrounds, from which country they're from, how long they've been in Canada, etc. But the biggest challenge was, are we going to get these people to open up and speak about the issue honestly and comfortably? In terms of surprises and challenges, I mean, the first surprise was the segments of BIPOC that Modo membership was underrepresented.
It's oftentimes the strategy that we recommend versus what the findings show. We're trying to find a meeting ground between what are some of the low-hanging fruit from some of the communities that are feeling excluded in some shape or form, as well as the resources of the organization to meet hand in hand. A lot of times the expectation really is to start, not to be there right now. And so the idea is to break down the opportunities and phases. What can we do immediately to address some of these concerns within the power of the organization? And then what can we do in the long run, maybe over a year or 2 years, that we can work towards?
Be clear on why you're doing what you're doing, because otherwise we cannot design the right investigation from a research perspective, the right insights or advice, if there are some hidden agendas internally that we don't know about. Which leads to the second advice, is have a commitment internally to carrying this forward.
Recommendation is always to try to take one bite at a time. And the idea here is to ensure that it's a lot of work, it's a big field, there's a lot of people to be inclusive of, and oftentimes it can feel overwhelming in this space. Every little step that you take toward becoming more inclusive is a win. What we also want to do is ensure that you're practicing the idea of nothing about us without us, which is when you're speaking or working with a certain community or trying to outreach to that community, you want to make sure that they are represented behind the camera and as part of the process as well.
Our co-op does not, in fact, sufficiently represent the communities in which we operate. That's what we learned. We confirmed that we need to go deeper. Why are there some communities that are less inclined to car share or car share with Modo? This is causing us to look more closely at ourselves, at how we represent ourselves to potential new members, including newcomers to Canada, at the processes that surround joining and onboarding, at our approach to payments, at the way we educate our employees, At the end of the day, we will be a better and more inclusive co-op.
So I think we're very fortunate at Modo to have the research before us. We're able to keep coming back to it to guide us on how we prioritize and plan our work. We've actually been working with another expert in DEI to take a critical look at our people practices, namely how we recruit for new employees and what the employee experience is for those with marginalized identities. As we speak, Modo is in the midst of recruiting for a couple of positions, and we've been able to apply our learning and the recommendations to this current recruitment process.
Our goal at Modo is to welcome as many people from as many communities as possible into our co-op to enjoy the benefits of car sharing. In order to do that, there are some things that we are doing very well today and some things that we can do a little bit better. Outreach, changing up our photography to be more representative, advertising, those are the easy parts. This is not a BIPOC marketing campaign. This is an organization-wide initiative. And we see our role in supporting the organization and our BIPOC members, and that we can really share authentic stories of our members, bring on new ambassadors, bring on new members, potentially partner with organizations who perhaps we haven't in the past.
We know that it takes courage and resources to get started. There's a risk of making mistakes. What we want to do is encourage other co-ops and small and medium enterprises generally to start on their own journey. We hope that by sharing our story, that'll spark conversations at other organizations and a call to action.
Sometimes I think about how companies and management teams might be approaching this work around DEI and anti-racism. And I'm definitely proud that Modo wants to move beyond performative allyship. We're really investing in change here, and our employees have also reached out and shared this sentiment with me. But something remarkable for me is that our conversations about inclusion and belonging and anti-oppression have continued to evolve and adapt. All of us are learning new language, adding new perspectives, and becoming more and more comfortable with being uncomfortable, and it's only just the beginning.